Namaste. Welcome to Awaken Living with Nibodhi. This week, we are exploring a topic that essentially touches each and every one of us who is on the healing path. That's our triggers, not from the typical lens of avoidance or discomfort. We're going to look at triggers and how they become a sacred doorway into our deeper self-awareness, into healing our nervous system, and ultimately for our spiritual growth. And triggers are ultimately and often misunderstood or even vilified. But when they're met with awareness and compassion and empathy, we can become they can become our greatest allies in our journey for healing and awakening. They're not a problem, they're a portal. What is a trigger? A trigger is essentially emotional reactions that are perceived as uncomfortable or unwanted. We all experience them. It can be a word, a tone, a look, a situation that instantly sets us off into a flood of sensation in the body and a habitual storytelling in the mind. And what they do often is lead us to believe that something is wrong, either with ourselves or with someone else or a situation. I want to reframe what a trigger is. I don't see them as a problem. I see them as an activation, as a portal. The trigger is it's if you have a gun, it's one part of the gun. It's a very small part of the gun. The fundamental issue is the whole gun itself and the ammunition inside of the gun. The trigger is ultimately, from a modern psychological language, the trigger refers to an internal or external stimulus that's essentially evoking a strong emotional or physiological response or reaction that is rooted in our past experience. It's never about the present moment. And the mind then wants to label this current situation as bad or something to avoid or harmful, or this is the problem. From a Vedic psychological perspective, the interpretation misses the deeper invitation. In Vedic psychology, especially through Sankhya philosophy, which we've discussed already, and through the yogic psychology, the mind, which is manas, is not just a reactive machine. It's ultimately a field of impressions, our samskaras, that are shaped by the past, by our past karmas, by our past conditioning, and whatever experiences we've had. May they be good or bad. But that's also a judgment and a label. We need to go beyond that. We need to go beyond good, bad, right, or wrong in order to heal. So what triggers are doing is intimately connecting us to these samskaras, the mental imprints, or the vasanas, the tendencies that we've accumulated from these past experiences. And these are very subtle. They're subtle impressions that were formed by the past experiences, and especially those that are tied to very strong emotions or emotional content. And when a current experience resonates with one of those samskaras, we have an instant and intense reaction that is not necessarily in relation to the present moment. Remember, the trigger is not the enemy. It's the activation of the hidden trauma, of the hidden samskara. It's a dormant imprint surfacing for release or integration. It is there to inform us that we need healing. In the same way that pain signals a deeper wound that needs tending to, triggers indicate that something within us is asking for empathy, for compassion, for a conscious witness to show up. And from this perspective, whatever's triggering us becomes a sacred messenger. Michael Brown is a prominent writer and master of this. He wrote a book called The Presence Process, where he tells us that the trigger is the message. The person or situation that activates you or activates us is not the cause. It's merely the courier. It's the messenger, not the message. However, when we focus on the external, we start blaming, we start shaming, we start trying to fix, and we miss the gold that lies beneath the surface, because there is gold there. And when we can access that gold, we become golden. That's not a flaw. That's a profound blessing, actually. It really is the mind's body system's way of trying to bring unresolved karma or any trauma or psychological content to the surface, where we can see it, where we can feel it, where we can integrate it, and ultimately heal it and transmute it. The ancient Vedic rishis, these yogis, these enlightened masters, they understood this as an opportunity, a precious, precious opportunity to burn karma through tapas, the sacred fire, or the inner effort and awareness, sitting with what is, instead of trying to numb it out with sex, drugs, shopping, alcohol, Netflix, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, whatever we use to numb it out. It's an invitation for awareness. If we can move from reaction to response, we can become present with ourselves, and then we can heal. When we're triggered, it's almost this instantaneous cascade of physiological and emotional reactions. In my life, when I've been triggered, almost always my heart rate increases. I flush. My breath, I actually tune out from my breath. My breath becomes shallow. I'm no longer connected to my breath. My body, my muscles become tense, and my mind starts racing. That's for most people, but that's been my tangible experience. And when we're triggered, we step into the nervous system's reaction, where it reacts faster than thought. That's a sympathetic fight, freeze, flight, or fawn response. And that floods the body with inflammatory stress hormones, cortisol, adrenaline, and it gives us this urgent sense that something is wrong, we're in danger. But I ask a question. I've asked myself this question so many times, and I'm getting better at it. I'm not perfect, but I'm getting better at it. I ask the question, what if this isn't wrong? What if my body is simply doing its job, protecting me, alerting me, or remembering? That's how we survive for thousands and thousands of years. But what if we can go from surviving to thriving? And so many of these reactions, at least in my life, were shaped early in life as protective strategies. In the Vedic philosophy and Vedic thinking, these were seen as our vasanas, our tendencies or patterns that stem from deeply embedded karmic impressions that may or may not have anything to do with the parents we were born into, the situation we were born into. We may have brought that with us from a previous birth, and we're just here to learn the lesson of love, to love ourselves with deep empathy and deep compassion, and to love and heal those triggers. And it is true, most of our strongest triggers do stem from our early childhood experiences. These protective patterns were formed to ensure our survival, emotionally, physically, and socially. We learned adaptive skills so that we could fit in, because we need to fit in. We need a tribe. We need a community. And the part of us that reacts so strongly, it's not broken. It's actually doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It's doing its job perfectly. It's helping us to survive. But that doesn't mean we're thriving. And in Ayurveda, there's the concept of manovah shrota. It's the subtle channel that governs our mind and all the mind processes. And when these channels become congested with unprocessed emotion, pain keeps cycling over and over and over again, because what it wants to do is be seen. It wants to be heard. It wants to be loved and then eventually released. It doesn't want to be trapped as a burden, as a prisoner in our bodies, in our cells, in our tissues. Remember the saying, the issues are in our tissues. They're 99.999% emotional, mental issues that came from early childhood trauma. What if we can pause? What if we can pause long enough to notice what's happening without the immediate reaction? When we can do that, a small amount, a sliver of choice opens up. This is when we actually step into true sadhana, into true spiritual practice. We can sit in a cave forever and meditate. That doesn't mean we've achieved anything. As soon as we come out into the world, that's when we find out what we've gained. We can sit in a cave and love our parents, love our family, and then we come back to our family and we react instantly. That's a real spiritual practice. You want to find out how far you've come spiritually, go hang out with your family for a week or even a weekend. But rather than seeing these triggers as failures, our reactions as failures, we have the opportunity to view these as a response, as a sacred guardian, really. And they were formed during times when we actually really needed them. We needed them the most. But now they're surfacing so we can, like a computer that needs updating, the software, the operating program needs updating, we also need updating. And so they surface so we can update our internal programming. We can move from subconscious programming to consciousness. The tantric path also teaches us that liberation, self-realization, understanding the self, ourself as part of the universe and as the universe. This process is through the body. It's in and through the body. It's not by escaping or bypassing it. It's not by bypassing our emotions, just saying we're spiritual and God will work it out. It is through embodiment. God gave us bodies for a purpose, and triggers then become moments of embodied spiritual practice, of sadhana. And what they do is invite us to bring our awareness into the very discomfort we habitually avoid. It requires incredible amount of love and devotion to yourself. Again, in the Vedic philosophy, there's so much wisdom to be had here. Yoga, Vedic philosophy, Vedanta, Ayurveda. What the Vedic philosophy tells us is that this is the cultivation of a process called viveka, mindful discrimination. We're not discriminating in a negative way. We're discriminating between real and unreal, what's helpful, what's not helpful, and vairagya, non-reactive detachment. It doesn't mean we're not involved. We're just not identifying who we are with the situation anymore. Rather than blindly following the reaction, we sometimes and most oftenly painfully sit with it. It's painful to sit with ourself. It's painful to sit in quietness with ourself and deal with our own mind, but we need to. And in that, we become the witness. We become the observer. And by becoming the witness, becoming the observer, we finally, after years, decades, lifetimes, begin to choose our response rather than be enslaved by our conditioning, rather than being enslaved by a reaction. In Ayurveda, the mental and emotional imbalances result in this accumulation of what's called ama, which is toxicity. It's manasa ama, mental toxicity, and that gets stored in our nervous system. And what the triggers are ultimately doing is acting as a diagnostician. They're helping us locate where the toxin is. And when we notice the sensation rising, whether that's tightness in the chest or heat in the face, or the feeling that we need to run or shut down, we stand at a crossroads. It's an intersection. In that moment, we essentially have two options. From the Vedic perspective, there's two options. We can follow that karmic groove, that vasana of reactivity, and that leads us to more and more suffering. Or option number two, we can pause, we can breathe, and we can do self-inquiry. And we can ask ourselves a couple of questions here. What is this really about? And that takes courage to know, because we have to look at the shadow. We have to go into our darkness. We get to experience our pain. We only want pleasure, but the pain is part of the duality. So we have to ask, what is this really about? And then, really doing the deep dive, we ask, what is asking to be healed here? We don't need to do anything yet, but we just need to understand what's happening. What is this about, and what is asking to be healed? We may not be ready for that, and that's okay. That's totally okay. Everything has its perfect timing, but we should ask this question. We can ask this question. We have two options: to follow the vasana of reactivity, or we can work on healing. I imagine if you're listening to this podcast, you're very far into the podcast, you're involved in it, and you are interested in the healing, so we need to ask those questions. But we need to have a pause here. We need to breathe here, and it's sacred. If you're in an interaction with someone and you feel uncomfortable, you feel triggered, just say, I need to pause here. I need to come back to you. I need to sit with myself and understand what I'm feeling, because I just don't know. And that is okay. And sometimes it's totally okay to be confused. And it's okay to not be okay. And we need to pause and take time. And that pause is the space where our transformation starts. It's not the be-all, end-all. It's the beginning. In the sacred Vedic text, the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna, the incarnation of God, tells his best friend and devotee, Arjuna, that true strength lies not in aggression, but in the inner mastery of our senses and emotions. That's complete embodiment. In the Bhagavad Gita, in chapter 2, verse 56, it says, "He who is able to withstand the storm is a yogi." A yogi doesn't mean some special, holy, exalted person. It means one who's established in self, one who is in union with themselves, one who knows the self. And if we can meet our triggers with grace, that is living awakenedness. That is walking the path of awakened living. Again, I was telling you earlier, the author Michael Brown, in his presence process, describes the situation and people who trigger us as messengers, not the message. The trigger is the message. When we demonize the trigger, or we make the trigger wrong or bad, or get lost in the blame game, we blame the external circumstances, we are missing the gift. We are missing the present moment. We're dealing or dwelling in the past. We're dwelling in our story. That's not helpful if we want to heal. We need to see our triggers as an opportunity to access the unconscious pain, the unconscious or conscious fear, and the unmet need. We have to be ready to heal. And it is scary. Yeah, we have to sit with ourselves. We have to sit with all of that. If we want to live an awakened life, it is necessary to respond to a trigger differently than the condition that we've grown up with. If we want to respond to a trigger differently than our conditioned urges, it is not easy. And we will fail, and we will stumble, and we will fall, and we will get scraped, and we will get bloodied. It requires practice. If you want to learn to ride a bike, quite often, I remember when I learned to ride a bike, I fell, I bruised my knee, I scraped my knee, I cut my knee. But I wanted to learn to ride the bike, so I kept getting back on the bike. It was worth it. And I'm telling you, from my own experience, it's worth it. This is not just an intellectual practice. This is not talk. Talk therapy is okay. Journaling is okay. Insight is helpful. But we need to feel it. We need to feel it in and through the body, because that's what we have. This is the temple of consciousness. Without somatic engagement practices that work through the body, transformation is essentially going to remain elusive. We can't actually touch the true transformation. We can't touch and open the true gift that's being presented. We cannot learn to swim by reading about swimming in a book. We can't rewire the nervous system with thoughts alone, okay? We have to do the work. Ayurveda, yoga, tantra, somatic experiencing, they offer us practices that can support our integration. I want to share some of those practices with you right now, okay? The most important one in my experience and what I've learned in 49 years of being here on the planet is that breathing changes everything. Pranayama, the expansion of consciousness, the expansion of prana, of life force, conscious breath work. What this does is activates our parasympathetic response. We stop reacting, or at least we reduce our reactivity. What slow, deep breathing does is regulates the nervous system, and it can anchor us in awareness. Breathe and everything changes. That has been my life experience. Whenever I've been angry, whenever I've been freaking out, whenever I've been in sympathetic fight, freeze, or flight, if those moments when I've had enough awareness to stop, breathe, listen, that's been where the most profound changes happen. And when I haven't done that, I've done horrible things. I've screamed at people. I've yelled at people. I've had to ask for forgiveness more times than I would like because my reactions cause pain in other people. When we can breathe, we can become present. One of the greatest tools is going back to our mother, not our biological mother, Mother Nature, Mother Earth, spending time in nature. There is nothing like it. And if we can breathe consciously in nature, that's the best. Spending time in nature, being in nature, not just for for an hour, for 1 hour is miraculous. But if you can spend a weekend in nature, a week in nature, 3 weeks a year in nature, it reestablishes our connection to the universe, to ourself. But 1 hour in nature, if you can walk barefoot in nature, hug a tree, lay on the earth with nothing between you and the earth, this grounds the body and it regulates our biological and cosmic energy field. And then from there, we can actually enter a meditation state with feeling awareness. When we can enter that meditative state, we can begin to notice sensations without the story. We can witness the trigger as a wave that arises and passes, just like in the ocean. And it helps us to stop the identification with the story, with the pain, with the mental thoughts. We actually start identifying with consciousness itself, where we become a witness. It's like watching the movie. We watch the movie of our life. And some movies are worth watching a couple of times, and some are not. We have to discern that, and that comes from stillness. We can do yoga, the physical yoga practice, restorative yoga, yin yoga, trauma-aware, trauma-sensitive yoga, helps the body to repattern its responses. Restorative or yin yoga puts us back into a parasympathetic state where we can consciously, through breath, through awareness, release the issues from the tissues with empathy, love, and compassion for both ourselves and anyone else we see as a perpetrator. The next thing is the Vedic practice of mantra, these sacred syllables that are vibrational, doing mantra or mantra japa, the repetitive practice of the mantra. Because what mantra does is gives the mind a single-pointed focus to reorient itself, using these sacred sounds to repattern the mind during or after our trigger, after the trauma activation. What mantra actually means: manas, mind, trataka or trayate. Manas trataka, manas trayate. Trataka means one-pointed focused awareness. Trayate becomes transcendental. We bring the mind into one-pointed focused devotional awareness, loving awareness. And then we go beyond those thoughts. And when we go beyond the thoughts, we're not checking out. We're not going new age woo-woo out to some other world. We're becoming completely aware. We're becoming completely present with who we are. And then there's a physical practice that I actually love, okay? Some call it contrast hydrotherapy, some call it cold exposure. Going in cold water, really cold water. Now, they have ice buckets, they have ice baths, they have cold plunges. My favorite way to do that is to go, especially into the Colorado Rockies, because I spent a lot of years in the Colorado Rockies and the New Mexico Rockies, going into a cold mountain lake. But doing a cold plunge, cold exposure, contrast hydrotherapy, it builds our nervous system. It builds the nervous system's capacity to sit with discomfort with both awareness, presence, mindfulness, breath, and without reaction. And it builds our capacity to stay present with intensity. And then we get out of that. When there's intense emotions, when there's intense situations, we have the ability to sit with that with awareness. There's so many physiological reasons to do that too. There's so many health benefits, longevity benefits, immune benefits. But on a completely mental, emotional, psychosomatic awareness, it builds our nervous system's capacity to be with what is. One of my favorite tools in this world for understanding self and dealing with trauma is compassionate inquiry. This was taught by Dr. Gabor Mate. I've done the compassionate inquiry training first and foremost for myself, and also I offer it as a tool in Ayurveda, Yoga, Jyotish in my counseling with individuals. What Dr. Gabor is offering us or asking us in such a beautiful, gentle way is, number one, what's beneath the reaction? And what pain is this protecting? Our reaction, what pain is this protecting? These tools ultimately help build a container of safety so that even really intense emotional waves can be held and seen without being overwhelmed. It's called self-regulation. And through these practices, we can train the nervous system to trust that it can survive a trigger without collapsing or attacking. The yogis had a vision of this as well. They called it titiksha. Titiksha is a spiritual strength to endure duality, pleasure, pain, hot, cold, praise, blame, without losing our equilibrium. Because losing our equilibrium, to put it bluntly, it just sucks, okay? When we're not established in self, when we don't know who we are, when we get lost in anger and jealousy and greed and all these things, it just sucks. It's not nice because we know who we are. And who we are is love. We're kindness. We're compassion. We're the beauty of creation. And in our higher self, we are God. We are goddess. And so it sucks when we're separated from that. Suffering sucks. And it all comes from separation from knowing who we are. So remember, being triggered does not always mean being dysregulated. We can be triggered. We can feel that intensity and still be grounded in our body and in our breath. I want to be clear. Being triggered does not necessarily mean we're dysregulated. We can be triggered and still be completely aware and still be completely conscious and still be living an awakened life. We can feel the inner fire of discomfort and still be safe. This is an essential and a vital truth for all humans and all healers. And there's a saying, healer, heal thyself. We have to do our work. If we want to be of use to someone else, we have to do our work. And we have to be honest about where we're at and where we're not. In fact, one of the most powerful teachings of living an awakened life, of the awakened path, is that freedom does not mean that we're never triggered. It means we know what to do with the trigger. That's it. We know how to sit with it. We know how to learn from it. And we know how to alchemize it into wisdom. Wisdom comes from experience. It doesn't come from book learning. It comes from walking through the fire and coming out on the other side. This is the path of real maturity, emotional maturity, mental maturity, spiritual maturity. And what that means is when we feel something deeply, we don't collapse and we don't avoid it. It means relating to it from our center. That's all. It means we're in awareness. And this is really, really important. If you're a therapist, if you're a life coach, if you're a health coach, if you're a space holder, if you can't sit with your own triggers, how do you expect to hold true space for another in theirs? We have to be honest with ourselves, okay? It's so important. And real change, really, the alchemy of triggers, the real change happens not in our plans or in our affirmations. It comes in these tiny sacred moments between the stimulus and response. Where is that? It's in the space between the breath. We inhale and we hold it and we become aware for a few seconds, a few nanoseconds, and a few moments. And we just witness and we let go. We exhale. So it's in that tiny sacred moment between the stimulus and response. It's in the gap between the breath. It's in the moment in between the blinks. Can we stay conscious in between the blink? Can we stay awake in between the blink? And when our old programs want to react, if we can, instead of reacting, take a breath, take a pause, choose something else, choose something new, we free ourselves from karma. We free ourselves from reacting. We're reacting out the past. When we react, we're perpetuating karma. When we respond, when we become responsible, responsibility to our past, to ourself, to our present moment, the karma dissolves. It's rewritten. And in the gunas, the mental qualities of yoga, of Ayurveda, this is the rajas. When the rajas, the mental activity of reactivity, the reactivity of reactivity, we're reacting to our reactions. It's phenomenal that we do that. It just perpetuates. But when we allow the rajas of reactivity to surrender or give way to the sattva, that pure state of awareness, we're free. We're free from that. And who in this world doesn't want to be free? Actually, all of our addictions come from the desire to be free. We don't want to feel pain because we know who we are. Our essence in nature is Sat Chid Ananda, that pure state of bliss consciousness. That's what creation is for: bliss, awareness, beauty, divinity. And so we all want to get back to that. And we've developed external patterns: sex, drugs, alcohol, tobacco, shopping, whatever it is, to try to get back to that. But it doesn't hit the root. We have to go to the root. In the Vedic psychology, this is the moment when ahamkara, the ego identity, relaxes its grip, its bond on us, and the buddhi, that higher intellect, shines through. In the first couple episodes, we talked about the Sankhya, the Vedic philosophy of Ayurveda, to know the truth, to know the self. We talked about this here. It goes into deep understanding of this. So if you're just tuning in now, go back to the first couple episodes where we talk about this, because there's profound wisdom in that. But what this is telling us is that the higher self, the Atman, has a moment to lead, to guide us into the light. There's a mantra in the Vedas: Om Masato Ma Sakamaya, Tamaso Ma Jyotir Gamaya, Mrityor Ma Amritam Gamaya. We move with awareness from untruth to truth, darkness to light, and death to immortality. Not physical death, but spiritually. We no longer die because we're awake. We know we are the universe. When we can enter this place, healing is not only possible, it's inevitable. It's what happens naturally and spontaneously. Awareness alone, unfortunately or fortunately, is not enough. Healing our relationship with our triggers requires embodied practice. So this is the invitation. This is the spiritual invitation to awaken, to heal all of this. In Vedic psychology, in Ayurvedic psychology, in yogic psychology, change is only real when we can consciously choose differently in that moment of intensity. This is sadhana. This is a spiritual practice. This is the awareness that we want to cultivate. Not what we do on the meditation cushion in the cave, in the fire of real life. We must have courage. We must cultivate fearlessness. If we want to sit in the fire of real life and become whole, completely embodied, awakened, living God and Goddess, we have to sit in the fire. And I can't tell you the amount of times that my nervous system pulled me towards a habitual reaction. I can tell you this because I've gone through it from my own experience. And in the moments that I've chosen the path of Dharma, of what I actually came here for, the true self. I came here for love. I want to be loved. All we want is love. Those are the moments when I've changed. Those are the moments when I've been able to give up those habitual patterns in the reaction and become aware. That's the evolution. That's the self-evolution. So again, we don't need to avoid the triggers. And believe me, I'm triggered a lot. If I get triggered all the time, okay? And what I can do now, honestly, I can say this is 99% of the time, I can meet them with devotion and awareness. I'm not perfect. I'm not enlightened. I'm not a master. I still get triggered. And on the rare occasion, I do react. And every time I react, here's the thing. My reactions, the awareness that I'm caught in my reaction, the time that it takes me to go back into that awareness gets shorter and shorter and shorter. And if it's in relation to another human, then I ask for forgiveness as soon as I remember that I got messed up, as soon as I remember that I was out of integrity, that I was out of integrity with both myself and the universe, because I was in reaction to a trigger that had nothing to do with the present moment. I wasn't in mindfulness. And the greatest thing that I've learned is to stop beating myself up over it. Yeah, when I get caught, when I get lost, when I react, the greatest thing I've learned is to stop beating myself up over it and just have compassion and empathy for myself. Okay, great. I'm just not enlightened. It's the universe telling me you still got work to do. And so I go back and I do the work. So what I would recommend here is to take a moment to gently inquire within. I'm going to offer numerous reflections here. And I choose different ones, different days to reflect on, but I do a couple of reflections every day. So I'm going to offer some reflections here. Choose one or choose several of these for reflection or journaling. It's really great to journal because we can look at that journal and see how far we've come, and that's so inspirational. But I do recommend taking time to do self-inquiry with this, take time to journal, take time to meditate on it. Really, if we want to grow, we need to do self-inquiry. We need to look at ourselves honestly, okay? So here's several reflections that have helped me throughout my life that I think can help you. So you can write these down. You can go back to this podcast whenever you need to. So the first one is, when was the last time I felt intensely triggered? And what story did my mind attach to it? When was the last time I felt intensely triggered? And what was the story my mind attached to it? And this is in the show notes, so you don't need to write everything down right now. It'll be there for you to look at. You can print this out. You can write it down. The next one that I really look at frequently is, what might this trigger be asking me to feel or see more clearly within myself? That's profound, because we're really willing to look at the messages the universe is offering us. The next one is the first real step of embodiment and somatic healing and yin yoga, and really accepting that we're a whole being, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. The reflection is, can I locate the sensation in my body and breathe into it without needing to fix it or change it? Can I locate the sensation in my body? Where am I feeling this in my body? Without judgment, without it being right, wrong, good, bad, breathe into it without needing to fix it or change it. Then another question we can ask, what protector or survival strategy may have been activated in this moment? And can I humbly thank it for its service? What protector or survival strategy may have been activated in that moment? And can I honestly, humbly thank it for its service? The next question I actually ask on a daily basis: if I choose to respond from my highest self, what does that look like? That's so beautiful. If we're asking ourselves that question every single day, it's actually much harder to get triggered. We still do, but it's less frequent and less intense. If I choose to respond from my higher self, what does that look like? Okay. This is also a phenomenal daily practice for myself. What regular practices help me build capacity to meet the intensity without collapsing a reaction? I have a sadhana. It's a non-negotiable in my life. I wake up at a certain time. I do meditation, yoga, mantra, pranayama, different practices. Those are non-negotiables in my life, because what they do is help me build the capacity to meet the intensity of life without reacting or collapsing most of the time. Another really great one that I've used before is, where in my life am I being invited to lean in rather than avoid uncomfortable situations or emotion? That means being able to sit with our shit, being able to sit in the discomfort. Where in my life am I being invited to lean into it? Don't avoid it. Be with the uncomfortable sensation or emotion. It's profound. There's been moments, even in the last year and a half, where I wanted a situation to stop so badly. And I knew in the depth of my being that for me to go and ask for it to stop would not be growthful for everyone involved. So I sat there for 4-5 hours under the stars and just was with what was. And what that led to was profound healing and transformation. I can tell you this. I know it works. Another question: what situations or people most commonly trigger me? And what might this reveal about my unmet needs or past wounds? That's a really good thing. What are the situations? So one of my favorite teachers, Ram Dass, when he first started hanging out in India with Maharaji Neem Karoli Baba, his guru, He had all these situations that he couldn't go to because he was triggered. He couldn't go home because his parents triggered him. He couldn't go to the city because the city triggered him. He couldn't even go to the grocery store because if someone said the wrong thing, that triggered him. There was an unmet need and a past wound involved in that. So we need to look at what situations or people are triggering us and what this reveals about us, not about the trigger, not about the situation, what it reveals about us, what need is not being met, what wound is being triggered. Then here's a great question to go with that. When I feel triggered, what happens in my body? Can I name the sensation without judgment? Just being aware. It's an awareness practice. How do I usually respond to triggers, and what would a more conscious response look like? These are just beautiful, reflective questions we can ask ourselves. What stories does my mind tell me when I'm triggered? Here's a really, really important question. Are they true? Are they kind? Are our stories telling us the truth, and are they telling us something that is kind, loving, and helpful? Actually, the word think. Is it thoughtful? Is it helpful? Is it inspirational? Is it necessary, and is it kind? Think. It's an acronym. What would it feel like to meet my triggers with compassion instead of criticism? Stop judging ourselves. Now, this is also very important. What daily practice can I build that strengthens my capacity to stay present when discomfort arises? Whether that's breathing or meditation or yoga or going for a run or jog or swimming or a cold plunge, whatever it is, a daily practice that strengthens our capacity to stay present. It's like going to the gym. You want your muscles to stay strong and get built, you need to do a daily practice. And the last one, who in my life are models? Who in my life models conscious responses well? And what can I learn from them? We need role models. We need inspiration. So these are amazing questions we can ask ourselves. Pick one, pick two, pick three, whatever your capacity is. Don't do all of them. I don't do all of them. I do one or two on a daily basis. What feels most pertinent, what feels most prominent, what feels most resonant with you. So in closing, I want to offer a few final reflections and just my own process. And reminders. Triggers, they're not roadblocks. They're not our enemy. They're reminders. They're conscious, divine reminders. They're actually our friends. They're invitations. They're our teachers. They really are the guides that point us to the parts of ourself that really are still waiting to be seen, to be loved, and to be integrated. And when we get triggered, it's arising not to punish us. It's not a punishment. It's not because we're bad people or we did horrible actions. It's to invite us to dive deep into the mystery of our own being, because each of the triggers points to a place where love and breath and presence and awareness are needed. And from the Vedic perspective, every moment of discomfort carries a karmic intelligence to it. What we do with it matters the most. So I invite you, the next time you become triggered, pause and honor, bow to that as a messenger. There is most likely a very sacred divine teaching there that's waiting beneath the surface and the service. It's both service and it's on the surface. What's beneath the surface? Dive deep. So may you greet your next trigger with the courage of your breath, the clarity of your awareness, and the compassion of your heart. I sincerely honor and thank you for joining me. And if this episode resonated with you, please share it with a friend, with a family member, and share your experience. Leave comments, share your experience with your triggers, what you've done to overcome the triggers, how you've dealt with them, when you've failed, when you've succeeded. None of it's good, bad, right, or wrong. And I invite you to reflect on the teachings that I've shared today. These are not my ideas. These are the rishis. These are the Vedas. These are these great enlightened masters trying to help us. They knew 5,000, 6,000 years ago that we would be suffering. And so they offered us so much blessings with their wisdom. So until next week, self-reflect. And most importantly, be kind to your mind, be kind to your body, be kind to your heart, and try to stay awake to the invitations that life brings. Stay awake to your own breathing. Stay awake to life. And it is one breath at a time, one conversation at a time, that we can really embody love and light and the essence of pure bliss consciousness and live an awakened life. Namaste.